What common sense is actually wrong? You hold your breath if you run out of air while scuba diving. Wrong, your lungs will explode as you'll float upwards with a lung full of air and you probably will try to surface anyway and the air inside them expands. The proper procedure is to scream all the way up to make sure your airways are open. Sometimes, when someone is having a bad day, it's better to just listen and agree rather than offer logical advice. Don't go to bed angry. Me and my husband ignoring this rule has saved our marriage. Do you know how many stupid fights are caused by being tired? When I worked in spectator event safety, we learned sports stadia that when an evacuation is happening, the safest place to go to is the playing field, as it is usually open air and therefore low risk if it is a fire evacuation. However, common sense takes over crowd dynamics and people try leaving the way they came in from the other side of the building, so this common sense trait results in thousands of people flocking into burning buildings. An example of this was the Bradford City Stadium fire. A huge chunk of the crowd headed back into the burning stadium looking for exits despite open air, the pitch being meters in front of them. Running hot water to pour grease down the sink drain. That water always cools eventually, and usually the same distance down a drain, where it solidifies, creating a blockage. Although it's best to never put grease down the drain, if you run cold water, and run the garbage disposal, the grease will solidify when it hits the cold water. The disposal will chop it into tiny pieces, and it will float down the line, creating no blockage. Municipal water and sewer worker of 15 years here. Pouring grease down the drain is never a good thing, for your pipes or the system. Grease passes through the body the same way it goes in, relatively speaking. As a young man, working fast food, loading up the fryers with fresh oil after cleaning and changing, it starts as a huge 50 pounds, white block of oil. Do not, ever, wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. If you have a reasonable suspicion that something happened to someone, call immediately. In crime shows, when they say the first 24 hours are crucial in a missing child case, they're not making it up. Ignore a bully and they'll leave you alone. No, they just see a weak target. Smack the shit out of them if they already made it physical. Note it is morally acceptable to nut punch when they've made it physical themselves. Going outside with wet hair will not make you sick. It will make you feel cold as hell. Those sore Sam Canadian, have showered. Just because you're not fat doesn't mean you're in good shape. I've been vegetarian for 15 years. Everyone thinks this means I eat healthy. I don't. My diet is mostly pizza and pasta and whatever microwaves faster than it takes me to eat it afterwards. My best friend is vegan. My best friend is also a big curvy woman. My best friend cannot roll her eyes hard enough when she hears people ignorantly proclaim that fat vegans don't exist because vegan equals healthy equals thin. I can give you a list of candy and junk food that's vegan. Vegan does not necessarily mean healthy. Vegan just means there's no animal byproducts or ingredients used to make the food. Put ice on a burn. Do not do this, it can rip the skin. Do put the burn under cool water immediately. They now recommend lukewarm water, as cold water can irritate the burn. It's not irritation. Hot skin is still elastic, and shocking it with cold makes it contract and take on a deformed and more painful shape. Reddit told me earlier today, fish skin work well on burns. Distance makes the heart grow fonder. Psychologists actually showed that it's the reverse, which is why LDR are very hard. Out of sight, out of mind is more accurate. I think this is an accurate observation in short term for someone that you see so often that if you are apart for a few days then you actually miss them because they're part of your routine. Think parents who read you a story every night but have to travel for a day or two for work or a family emergency, or friends at school you talk to on the daily about everything and then fall in sick, or so you have dinner with every night who goes on a business trip for a week. Technically you miss the interaction until a new routine settles in. That people are good eyewitnesses. We aren't. Our perception of things sucks. We are prone to so many biases that we aren't even aware of. If I grade papers on an empty stomach, I will grade them lower than if I am not hungry. And I will never admit that to be true. Even though it is. When you see an emergency vehicle with sirens on behind you, you should always slow down and move to the lane or shoulder to your right. This is exactly what you should do on city roads, but on the highway, you should never brake for an emergency vehicle unless they're pulling you over or you're slowing for a stopped vehicle. Braking in front of an ambulance just slows them down and creates traffic jams. Maintain your speed and get your signal on and merge as soon as you can. And for God's sakes, stop slamming on your brakes to avoid a speeding ticket when you see a cop. Just take your lead foot off the gas and slow naturally. Driving with you all is scary. If you know you're speeding when you see a cop, braking can tip them off because they see both your nosedive and your brake lights. That birds will abandon their chicks if the chicks are handled by humans. Not they won't. Put the baby bird back. Not only will the parent birds continue to care for a baby bird return to its nest, but it's also possible to trick them into raising baby birds that aren't originally from their nest if you sneak them in there. A lot of nutrition common sense is based on nothing, and/or has never been proven. I chalk it up to the fact that the human body is more adaptable than anyone gives it credit for, and that goes for diet as well as a lot of other things. That, and people think they can find solutions through dietary inclusion/exclusions, or they look toward those things as something to blame health problems on. Tilt your head back during a bloody nose. I get bloody noses all the time, always have, and the amount of times I'm just sitting there minding my own business with a tissue to my nose and somebody, usually older adults, walks by and tells me I should tilt my head back. No thank you, I don't want to flood my throat with nose blood, mum. Just ask them why and see if they can explain. I always thought the tilt your head back was just so you don't trip on things. A harsher punishment doesn't deter someone from committing a negative act. Common sense would tell you that if a drug dealer is aware of a law that would sentence them to life in prison for dealing drugs, that they'll be less likely to deal drugs. However, research shows that people often don't consider the negative consequences prior to breaking the law. Research shows that it isn't the harshness of the punishment, but the certainty of it that deters crime. Just throw your garbage in the parking lot, the cart people will pick it up. I mean, it's true, but at the same time, fuck you. Cart people. What? That's not common sense at all, people are just lazy. The slower and more defensive you drive, the better. Couldn't be further from the truth. You need a mix of defensive and offensive to truly be safe, keep traffic flowing, and to prevent bottlenecks. Don't be nice. Be predictable. Also, life is easier when you're young/youth is the best years of your life. Growing up, everyone always said this is the best time of your life, enjoy it while you can. They were super wrong. I hated school, hated being a student, and hated the lack of freedom. I work 50-ish, it varies, 40 to 72, but 52 is most common hours a week and it's great. I have money, freedom, I do what I want. Being a kid sucked. Really glad I came across this comment and I'm my man, thank you. In medical school we're taught that common things are common and that when you hear hooves, think horses not zebras, meaning that we should always assume the most obvious diagnosis. Medical students almost always jump to the rarest disease when taking multiple choice tests or when they first go out into clinical rotations and see real patients. Yep, and it's not just medicine. How much of IT is eliminated with have you tried turning it off and on again? Is everything plugged in? But sadly this does mean that when you've got a truly complicated problem you have to slog through the simple solution talk. Probably not the answer you're looking for, but the notion that darker roasts of coffee are higher in caffeine content. They're not, the caffeine gets cooked out the longer you roast the coffee bean. The lighter the roast, the higher the caffeine content. Lots of folks replied about the difference in caffeine content between roasts being negligible and discrepancies between the density/weight of the coffee bean when roasted. Read some of those replies for clarification. My point is dark roast equals more caffeine. When I worked at the gas station this guy is like, which coffee is the strongest? And I said, in flavor or caffeine content? And he said both, and I told him to do our medium roast and he said no, I want the dark roast, and years later I am still bothered because he thinks he's right. He's off somewhere in rural Minnesota thinking he's hyped the fuck up on his sludge coffee. And I hate it. People get mad when they don't get a tax refund. But getting a refund means you overpaid and loaned that money to the gov tax interest-free for the year. You don't want to owe hundreds or thousands of dollars at filing, but if you owe less than 100, that's way better than getting a refund. You don't need to wait 30 minutes before going swimming after eating. This was just invented by public pools to stop people bringing food into the water. Or by parents wanting to take a nap after lunch before having to keep an eye on their children again. My grandpa told a lie when I visited him and my grandma in Florida. He said that the Florida law was that you had to wait 3 hours before getting in the pool after eating instead of the 30 minutes back home. He wanted a nap in the middle of the day.